Hey, welcome to the channel, team. Man, I am stoked up to see you. So I've had this project in my mind for a little bit now, and it was how to discuss. I've seen it a lot in some different forums and across some different platforms. People talking about choosing or selecting a bug out location. Now, this is not the end all be all discussion to this, but I did think, let's look at a macro and a micro view. So we're going to take a road atlas and we're going to look at the macro view. Like if you had a little bit of money, what are some types of things and areas that you need to take into consideration, and which ones would we want to try to stay away from if we could? And I think when we were talking about, bug out locations, or maybe it's a cabin, or however it is that you want to describe it, right? We need to think about something that is sustainable, right? Something that's feasible, something that's economical, something that's easily defendable. What are you doing? Oh, on that note, hey, let me introduce you to my new cohort. It's my new co-star. It's Riggs. Riggs, say hi to everybody. Say hi, Riggs. Say hi. Riggs says, I was born on September 15th, 2020, so he's only about 10 weeks old. And I just taught him how to climb the stairs. So he's just learning out a few things right now. But you're going to see him, you're going to see a lot more of this dude, because he's going to be awesome, aren't you? Aren't you going to be awesome? All right, so when we're thinking about, are you going to be a good boy here? He's probably not going to be good. He's a puppy. He didn't know any better. So these are the types of things that we need to consider when we're selecting some property. And so how big of an area do you need? How much property do you need to be able to sustain, learn how to talk, Stoker, to be able to sustain life? Can you do it on a quarter acre? The answer, quite frankly, is depending on where that quarter acre is, yes, you can. I don't necessarily recommend it, but because if I can, I'd like to have at least 5 to 10 acres. 40 acres would be awesome. But again, it all depends on where our location is, the specific section of property is, what is around it, what is adjacent to it, what is nearby to it, what's far away from it. Does it need to be something that's close to us? You want to get down? No, you're being a distraction for everybody. Do we want something that's relatively close to us, or do we want to have to travel? If we do need to travel, maybe because we live in a city, how far away should it be, right? What's the closest that it should be? And I think, just on that note, something that's within a half an hour of a major road is going to be okay. Major road feeds into civilian population areas that have marketplaces and stores and feed stores, all this type of stuff. So on that note, so what we're going to do is I'm going to use some highlighters, and we're going to go through. We're going to look at the United States as a whole, look at some macro, some bigger picture type things. Because, I don't think that you have to just consider your own state. And now what I'm going to do is not going to be, 100%, verbatim, litmus test. These are the things that you must do. But these are some considerations of areas to stay away from. Because even in those small pockets of areas to stay away from, and actually not small pockets, large centers of the United States, I would try to stay away from. Can you find that perfect retreat, that perfect camping spot, that perfect bug out location, that perfect camping area? Yes, you can. Hey, so let's take a look. This is just a standard Rand McNally road atlas. It's the mid-size. It's not the huge one. I like this size because I can keep it right in the back of my seat in the truck. And so we're going to look at a macro view, like I said, and then we're going to look at a couple individual states, and then we'll close it out and move on from there. Hey, if this is the type of thing that you're into, when we're talking about emergency preparedness, survival techniques and tactics, field craft type things, then subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell. That way you can stay up to date on some future content, all right? All right, lots of things to consider. Hey, that will shock you, dog. That's a good boy. Come here. Riggs, come here. No, you want to sit there and look dumb? Yeah, get a little floppy ear. So let's dive into this map. Let's see what we can get ourselves into. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to just use a 2020 typical road atlas. Flip over here to the United States. And we're going to do a macro view, and then we'll go in and look at a couple individual states and do some more micro views, if that makes sense. So again, we're going to be looking at things from Stoker's perspective, and I'm going to start off using a pink highlighter, and I'm going to automatically take off areas that I think that I can rule out 100% without question. And the width of this marker is almost probably 40 miles. So it looks like I should be able to draw this fairly close to scale, and we'll get going. And so what I'm going to start off by doing here is pretty much everything from Portland all the way down this coast, I'm going to rule out. And I'm going to extend that all the way over here to Galveston. Now again, I'm thinking about things like sustainability, protection, suitability. And so when I think of these areas in my time in here, and in fact, I'm going to take all the way east of 95, in my opinion, is no bueno. Can we find some cubby holes in along this coastline? Yes. But the fact of the matter is, man, you have to look extremely hard to find something along this coastline. So biggest considerations are things like storms, but more than that, it's the population density. So when I think about a bug out location or a place that I want a secure location that I can have and a resource for myself and for the family, I need to think about security. And in fact, much of the East Coast is entirely too populated for my concern. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to start highlighting. I'm going to try to keep it in scale. Areas that I think that are just no bueno. I don't want to say anything off of a major interstate. I don't want to be right off the interstate. Far too many people moving along these interstates. Get off the interstates and it's not too bad. Even out here on the East Coast. And so instead of just thinking about what individual cities that you may or may not want to be around, if you take out the interstates, it kind of takes out those cities for you. Again, I think this is mostly to scale. It'd be about 25 miles. When you think about, somebody who's coming off the interstate and looking for something, the odds of somebody traveling more than half an hour off of what they might consider a safe route is slim to nil. And that's what we're looking for to mitigate some of our risks. Of course, out in the west, population density is a lot less. So there's a lot less roads and interstates that we're going to have to take off the map, so to speak. Once you take out these areas, you pretty much have probably 90% of the population taken out of your equation. So we can also, I think, just right off the bat, I'm not going to come down here along the border. You can find some remote locations, but almost too remote. Right, so obviously this whole area of California here is is out of the ballpark as well. And so, I mean, there's obviously some other risks, you know, that we have that come into consideration when it does come to the weather. And so anything, you know, it's pretty much in this area. Kind of make some overlap and loops here like that. We need to be concerned with tidal surge and hurricane issues. You know, up here in the Pacific Northwest, we do have couple fault lines here. We have a fault line, you know, it pretty much takes out all of California. There actually is a tendency for tidal waves up on the upper left coast. We do have a fault line that runs, you know, roughly in this area. Obviously, over here in Yellowstone, we have potential for a natural disaster. And, you know, I think when we start to zoom in a little bit more, some other things that we need to take into consideration are going to be things like, you know, it's not just down here, but also kind of up here. We'll see, actually this whole, actually really anything north of 40. It's going to have some pretty serious weather implications, right? Especially during the wintertime. And it doesn't mean that you have to stay away from these areas. But you need to know, if you're not from there, that if you're trying to buy some property in these areas and in this location, it's not property that's 100% usable 365. You know, you have a lot of other considerations to take into account. Now, obviously, I think you can see this kind of opens up a portion of the United States. You know, it becomes easy to get drawn in and to look at, you know, the bigger areas of open space that's out here, right? All Nevada and parts of Utah and maybe Colorado. But that doesn't mean that other areas such as, you know, kind of outside the triangle of Atlanta to Birmingham to Montgomery, you know, in this area is unusable. It's not what I'm saying at all. You know, you do have a lot of pockets. You know, eastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, southwestern Virginia, West Virginia, the entire state, right? Also very heavy, you know, Second Amendment friendly areas. You know, so those are also, that's another consideration that you need to think about. Of course, there's going to be some areas of Missouri that are going to be pretty well adapted to take care of what you need to. Now, there are areas in Pennsylvania, right? And certainly the vast majority of Maine. Now, I would love to take a place like Wyoming. I think it's, quite frankly, a very beautiful state. But man, if property is not overly expensive in places like that, especially if you get anywhere near the national park, it's absolutely ridiculous. On that note, if you can find even a small piece of property that adjoins to a national park or national forest, man, that's money in the bank right there. So that's kind of the macro view of the United States, and it's not perfect. Again, this is just a couple large observations, and we're literally using, you know, highlighters to mark off some property. So let's see if we can't zoom it in. Let's go to my home state of New Mexico. And then we'll look at a state that's up in the northeast, and then we'll look at one that's up in the northwest. All right, so again, you know, New Mexico, if we're going to take off and take out all of this property here, it's right along any of the interstates. Now, just doing that alone, man, if I stay outside of these areas, I just stayed away from 90% of the population of New Mexico, because it's all around Albuquerque, and Las Cruces, with a little bit up here in Santa Fe. But the vast majority of the population is right here in Albuquerque. Now, I know that, so areas that, in my opinion, would be a good place to look for. You do have some weather considerations, up in the Lincoln National Forest. But if it was me, I think I would pull something down in somewhere over in this area. Here I have a nice, decent size supply yard in Silver City. I can get all the supplies I need in Silver City. Obviously, it's a lot less densely populated of an area, and I have all the resources I need between water and lumber, timber. Animal population is good to go. Same thing over here in the Gilas. And I do have some weather considerations because we are getting up higher in elevation in the mountains. I kind of want to stay away from areas north or anywhere up here, to be honest with you. Entirely too left-leaning. Entirely too left-leaning up here. There are some decent spots up here, but I'm going to tell you what, if you've never been up in northern New Mexico, southern Colorado, it gets downright extremely cold in the wintertime, man. It's almost unbearable. Though I want to stay away from Roswell itself. Any area that's probably within this type of a radius from Roswell is not too bad. Gets me close enough that I can get into town if I need to, but far enough away that if any of these dudes try to come out looking for their own piece of property, that they're not going to find me. Right? Alamogordo is the same way. I don't want to live in Alamogordo. I can try to find something off to the east side of it. All right, let's go look at a state up in the northeast. We'll take, how does Pennsylvania sound? All right, again, Pennsylvania, man, it is so densely populated, it's absolutely crazy. But there are a lot of great resources up here. And again, I can take and we can cut out some of this property. See kind of what we're left with here. All right, so right off the bat, we can kind of see what we have left to work with. I'm going to get rid of this turnpike here as well. And almost if it's, shaded in this yellow color, we can kind of stay away from it. Those are extremely heavily populated areas. But outside of that, man, Pennsylvania has a lot to offer. And once you get away from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, it becomes an extremely red state. An extremely red state. So it does have a lot to go for. I'm not saying that, blue states are horrible or anything else, but, I think that there's a lot to consider. Now, I know this area a little bit up here, and I think it's not too bad of a location. Again, we are further north in elevation or as it relates to the equator, so we do have some weather considerations. It does snow quite a bit more here than it does, where I'm at in particular. But man, you just have so much open property. Now that we get away from that macro view and we start looking a little bit closer at the micro views, there's just so much to offer here. And property is not overly expensive in Pennsylvania. You can get some property that it's pretty inexpensive. And once you get close to anything close, like you want to stay away from these areas in pink, but man, if you were anywhere up off of these roads, you're close enough to get to the supplies that you need, right? You're close enough to get to what you need. So if we look at Texas, right, it's the same thing. So we can just stay away from all of these interstates. Now, what may look like it leaves a lot of the state left, but I'm going to tell you right now that I would be hesitant, to even get that close to this triangle right here between, the DFW, San Antonio, and Houston. Man, that it's a hot spot of liberalism. It's a hotspot of people. It's a hotspot of all kinds of issues that you really don't want to be in or around. Thing we really don't want to be in El Paso. You can be outside El Paso, but anything that's along this area on the border is just really, it's too remote. Too remote, and you have too many security issues along the border as well. And of course, this whole area here is no bueno. Now we're starting to shrink down what we have left to work with. And you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at just what the population is. I don't want to be anywhere near clean. But the resources that you have available around Lampasas, Brady, San Angelo, Brownswood, you have, Big Spring, Andrew, I wouldn't want to live in Odessa or Midland, but you could get close enough to it if you absolutely had to. And so this area of Central Texas is a little bit greener, right? It's going to have a little bit more vegetation because you do have, some water source resources that are flowing through. But you get south of 10, it becomes extremely dry, extremely arid. Come east of 35 and 45, and it's way too densely populated. Way too densely populated. Now, Texas seems big, but man, it's not as big as what you think that it might be. Washington, we do the exact same thing, right? We can take out all of these areas right here. And what do we have left? So once we stay away from these areas in pink, you just stayed away from probably 75, 80% of the state of Washington. I just cut it out. So it would be fine if I wanted to live up in northwestern of Seattle, right? You could find some areas up here that wouldn't be too awful bad. You could stay away from the people. But you do have some serious considerations. Of course, this whole area, is going to get socked in the winter time, right? Beautiful, but there's not a whole lot, and it's all national forest, so the odds of finding any kind of property is going to be outrageously expensive. But I mean, if you have the money to do it, that's fine. You could think about, things of areas up here around Port Angeles. That wouldn't be all that bad. Joaquin over in this area wouldn't be all that bad anywhere near along the coast. And this is a lot more rainy up here on the northwestern side of the peninsula. And it's a lot more rainforest to be quite honest with you. Anywhere here in the South Bend area wouldn't be all that bad. You get east of the mountains, and this whole area becomes, Ellensburg, this whole area, I-90 completely shuts down, right? Completely shuts down. So can you live over on this side of the mountains? Yes, you can. But once you're on this side of the mountains, it becomes extremely temperamental during the wintertime. Of course, to the left of I-5, you have fault line. And of course, you do have some volcanoes that are still, they might be dormant now, but they're calling for Mount Rainier to blow its top at, really any point in time. And once that happens, then you have things like tidal surge and mudslides that will happen automatically. Man, it's going to be nasty. If we look at a place like Alabama, man, there's more than enough resources once we, again, cut out all the places that we don't want to live, like along the interstates, and we know that we don't want to live inside this triangle. If we can avoid it, there's some good areas in there, but if we can avoid it, stay outside of the Birmingham, Montgomery, Atlanta triangle. There's all kinds of good resources. The property is cheap, it's inexpensive, and you can get close enough to live near an area that has the resources that you need, making it a lot more sustainable. Everybody, so there you go, man. Just a quick overview of how to select areas If you're looking to buy a small piece of property, again, a half acre could do it, but maybe you want something a little bit larger. You think about, again, how sustainable is the area, how suitable is it, how feasible is it to get to. Lots of considerations when it talks about protection, water, and food. Right, all kinds of things to consider. Let me know down in the comments below about what you think of the conversation. And that way we can just keep this conversation rolling. Man, as always, because I tell you what, you all provide so much of a depth and context to each and every single video. I know I certainly appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say. So we'll keep this conversation rolling, man. As always, until then, you stay stoked.